Welcome to the Performance Collective, where I bring together experts across the running, fitness, and human performance space to share insights, experiences, and practical strategies for improving performance. Hosted by me, Hannah Witt, a USCA certified running coach and athlete success and operations manager, this podcast features conversations with elite athletes, coaches, nutritionists, chiropractors, race directors, and industry leaders. Whether you're chasing a personal best, returning from injury, or looking to better understand the science behind training and recovery, the Performance Collective offers actionable insights to help you train smarter and perform at your best. Welcome back to the Performance Collective. I'm your host, Hannah Witt, and we are so fortunate today to have Mike Weiss with us, who is an exercise physiologist and endurance sports consultant. He's also the founder of Alta Health and Performance Solutions. We have had a previous discussion, and I was just very keen to have a follow-up and get into more of what he does and how he helps the athletic community. And I'm just going to let him give us a little bit more information about his credentials and background. And let's just sit back and enjoy this one.
Well, hello to all that has provided me and Hannah the opportunity to enlighten them. Hopefully with what I have to offer in regarding performance testing. I'm an exercise physiologist and have a master's degree in exercise physiology with a emphasis in environmental exercise physiology. I'm also a certified exercise physiologist with American College of Sports Medicine and credentialed with exercises medicine, which is beneficial towards understanding the health implications of how exercise can be beneficial, but also to do institute directives in a positive way that will enable people to safely exercise. So that's sort of the clinical side of my background. And also have credentials in coaching and with USA Track and Field and some other ones that I'm working on. Background in addition to providing exercise performance testing. Also part-time professor in a number of universities here in California, as well as I work in another avenue of corporate health and wellness, doing lecturing and on the topics of how physical activity can decrease the risk of chronic disease and help manage the symptoms for those that have them. So here I am today. So thank you, Hannah. How would you like to proceed from here?
Absolutely. So again, thank you for being on our show today. And I actually didn't know that about you being a certified U.S. track and field coach. So that's new. It's interesting. Have you utilized that credential, or how do you use that one?
I have not used it as far as coaching athletes that are in, say, affiliated with USA Track and Field, but I obtained the certification due to my interest in wanting to develop my of track and field with more breadth. And so when I am in consulting roles, or when I am in writing for research purposes or for blogs or what have you, I wanted to just increase and develop and deepen my knowledge, and that's something that certainly as a and somebody that is been very values education. I think education is something that we should all, in one form or another, aspire to achieve each and every day of our lives. And so that's how I think I can. One of the ways I can contribute to the audience out there continuing to learn. And so that was my reason for obtaining that, the USA Track and Field qualification and certified credential.
I appreciate that you're a student. You're a professor, but you're also a student, and you are always trying to expand your knowledge and so many different areas. And so just to break down what you do a little bit more, you part-time professor, also a consultant, also you are the founder of Alta Health and Performance Solutions. So, and forgive me if I'm missing one of the many hats that you wear, but let's just dive into any of those areas, I guess, a little bit more. And let's start with Alta Health and Performance Solutions. So what exactly do you do in that business, and how do you serve, I guess, the athletic community, or is it open also to, I guess, your average pedestrian type customer?
Indeed, good questions. It has some really two I would say major avenues. One is to bring about greater health and wellness to my community. And with the corporate lectures that I've been doing for many years, it's to try to educate people on the value of how physical activity can enhance their health by reducing the risk for developing chronic disease, such as type 2 diabetes, coronary artery disease, hypertension, different myocardial kind of issues. And with sedentarism, that is I think supported by many people, with this opinion of mine that electronic age is making life easier. And people are like water; they will take the path of least resistance and direct themselves towards a pathway that reduces the level of distress on their bodies. But the human body, as I've told many of my attendees at lectures, I said that we belong to the animal kingdom, not the plant kingdom. So if we find that when we get up out of a chair that we've established roots and the chair doesn't move anymore, we need to move more. And that's how the body responds in a positive way. It's how we maintain our health, is to move. And so that's just one area that I work in, and is using the knowledge that I've gained through my education, as well as through the American College of Sports Medicine, the benefits of physical activity in not just allowing us to live longer, but really what counts is the quality of life. We all would like to go from A to Z in our life and cover the full spectrum of what the potential is, but unfortunately, some people stop short of that last letter, and fate has other plans. But at least what I try to do is say, whatever amount of time that we're on this planet, let's try to make it quality. And this is something that certainly physical activity can help us provide. So that's one area that I work in, and in the consulting and the lecturing. Another area then is really with the athletes, and that's the performance testing side that I have with my studio. That is doing aerobic capacity testing, metabolic testing, to help endurance athletes be able to obtain the number, the metric, with proper consulting that they can use to accelerate their pathway towards realizing their potential as an endurance athlete. And my own athletic background is in competitive cross-country skiing, as well as in long distance running and track and field. And so that was many years ago with the track and field part, but nevertheless, I enjoyed those sports very much. And so it's a natural thing for me to take my science background and then be able to utilize that for to help athletes be able to improve their endurance side. And then with my emphasis in university, which was environmental exercise physiology, because of my love for the mountains, I specialize in helping athletes who are in high altitude situations, in hot temperature situations, and global climate change. The effect of heat on our bodies is something that we especially for endurance athletes, ultra runners, people who are out for a long period of time. That's something that they need to take into a greater awareness now than in previous years. And so I help them with that. And then, then the consulting side of my company, Alt Health and Performance Solutions, is to help athletes understand what these performance testing data yield, and then also be able to, in the capacity of to help individuals train with this information. So to assist coaches with this information that I have, or one-on-one consulting with athletes and helping them be able to, from a physiological point of view, how to improve their performance. So those are the big areas of what Alta Health and Performance Solutions is, why it exists, and why it's gratifying for me to make this contribution to my community.
Great. Well, thank you for that information, explanation of what you're doing. And, I was thinking while you were explaining that, especially about the exercise physiology testing and the consulting that you do, we as consumers are very, very encouraged to get any kind of testing to see what our metabolism is like, what aerobic capacity is like, and other metrics like that. We have wearables where we can track heart rates, HRV, you name it. And, at the end of the day, it's almost like we have all of this information, but what do we actually do with it? How do we, what do we think of as this is good, this is bad, and how do I improve it? Or, so I do appreciate that not only do you do the testing, but you give a method of how to implement improving certain metrics, I guess, for populations that you help through your consulting. I guess my next question would be, how do you track the biomarkers and then implement some kind of strategy to help whatever person, team, etc., improve upon? That's a very broad question. I'm sorry that it's not more specific, but that's just something that I thought about when you were explaining your the different hats that you wear.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I guess what would be beneficial to because really support the best be able to answer that question is like, what am I testing when an athlete gets on the bike, gets on a treadmill? What is that fancy machine testing? So what is being analyzed is the respiratory gases that the athlete puts out while they're exercising, and it is, in fact, there's another name for with the testing machine is assessing. It's also known as gas exchange analysis. And so when athletes, I'm sure you've heard of this concept, it's called VO2, which is the volume of oxygen uptake. And so it goes aerobic capacity testing, cardiopulmonary exercise testing, or oxygen uptake in VO2. So what's happening is I'm analyzing how much oxygen the body is actually taking in via ventilation, so in the inspiration process, then transporting that through the vascular network, and then once it is received at the muscle cell level, how is it being utilized? How well is it being absorbed and then being part of the metabolic process to generate ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is a high energy compound. It's just the energy to move our muscles and to stay alive. So there's so what I look at is a number of figures. Is even though it's the amount of oxygen that's coming in, the way the machine often interprets it, it's a kind of a long equation, and so I won't go into all that. But we're looking at the expiratory gases, and through equations, I can go ahead and figure out how much the body is actually utilizing of the oxygen. And as a person becomes more aerobically fit, their economy goes up, meaning that for every oxygen molecule that comes in, they can utilize it at a much more efficient rate, just like you're an internal combustion engine in a car. If you can do at 60 miles an hour using only 1 gallon of gas as opposed to 2 gallons of gas, well, that must mean that the engine's running more efficiently. And so that's what we're trying to do as athletes, endurance athletes, is how to maximize our oxygen and our fuel substrates, which are carbohydrates, fats, proteins. Number one, though, for athletes is carbohydrates, and how to maximize these things so we can become most economical with them. And so by measuring the gases, we can go ahead and be able to determine how much oxygen is actually being utilized to be able to take the fuels, the carbohydrates, primarily, and fats, down and form ATP. So it's the main we look at oxygen, we look at carbon dioxide, we look at some other formulas that will determine how much actually what type of fuel is being metabolized, and this is known as respiratory quotient or respiratory exchange ratio, and that comes up by taking the volume of carbon dioxide and dividing it by the volume of oxygen, and with that, it can actually determine, it can tell the technician, the physiologist, what kind of fuel the individual is metabolizing. And this is really important because this is one of the things that through proper training programs, then the body can become more efficient at burning and metabolizing lipids. And that's really what we want to do, because we have a huge resource of lipids in our body relative to carbohydrate. We store it within our muscles. We call it intramuscular triglycerides, and triglyceride is a fat, just like cholesterol is a fat, phospholipids are a fat, but triglycerides are what we actually use for energy. We also store it in viscera, which is our internal, or of course subcutaneous underneath. So it's designed us to be able to exist without food for long periods of time, and that's why we store fat. And fat is a high caloric content. In fact, it has 9 calories for every gram, as opposed to carbohydrates and protein that only have 4 calories per every gram. And a calorie is a unit of energy. And so, in fact, with nutritional calories, it's a big C, but what we measure is something that's called a small c, and that's the amount of energy that it requires 1 milliliter of water to go 1 degree centigrade, and that's known as a small c calorie. But if you take 1,000 of those, it's called a kcal, and 1,000 little c's make a kcal, which makes a big C a nutritional calorie. So when you think of calories, think of energy. So when we look at then with the carbohydrates, though, our body cannot store very much. On the average, somewhere around 2,000, 2,200 calories, and that is stored in our muscle and stored in primarily in our liver. Those are the two big places. So there's already a limited amount. And so if we can become more efficient at metabolizing fats, then we can go a lot longer. And the more efficient we become with that, then through the testing, we can see when the technologists, exercise physiologists do these tests, we can see that the pace or the speed is increasing, though the amount of carbohydrate is staying relatively the same because the body is being able to metabolize more fats. But in order for fats to be metabolized, because of the chemical compound that's on it, has a lot of carbon atoms on it, it requires more oxygen to be able to break it down. And in fact, like if you look at carbohydrate is 7% more efficient than fat is, because carbohydrate can burn, metabolize with oxygen or without. It's a very primitive metabolic pathway that life on this earth developed before there was even enough oxygen to be able to allow it to metabolize. But as I said before, there's a limited amount of carbohydrate. So that is why that we want to try to metabolize fats as efficiently as we possibly can for as long as we can. So by looking at these, by taking these metrics, getting these figures, we can go ahead and see where that person is, look at the baseline, and then develop training programs to see, okay, how can he or she become a more efficient physiological mechanism to be able to metabolize fats for a greater amount of time. And one of the benefits, many benefits of that, is that then the glucose that we do need to take in, and this is why feeding is really important. Fueling is very important throughout our runs, but it can reduce the amount of fueling that we need to bring in, and if we can go ahead and rely a little bit more on lipids, and and that's something that the athletes, we need to be aware of, is what is our fueling rate? How much do we need in order to sustain the activity at the level of intensity that we want? And so the testing, sort of encapsulate it, it gets athlete specific information that then can really accelerate, streamline, and take out a lot of this serpentine pathway of how to get between where you are now and where you ultimately want to be, and allow that potential that you have to really lift off the page.
Okay, great. So would that encompass the metabolic testing that you do, or is that more? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm just thinking about it. The oxygen consumption. I'm trying to understand how having a mask and it's measuring, I guess the mask that they wear, is that mm-hmm. measuring what they are putting out, the gases that are coming out, right?
That's right.
Okay. And exactly. The composition of those gases that are coming out is then analyzed. And I'm thinking, if the oxygen is coming in, are there the gases that are coming out are linked to whatever's being metabolized, as in carb versus fat, I guess, versus protein too, if it's like that. Mm-hmm. Is that a very basic understanding, or?
Yeah, no, you're definitely going along the correct pathway here.
It is complicated, you know.
It is, and so I have to remember, that who my audience is here, and I understand that some of the stuff can roll off my tongue, pretty easily, but that's because I've been dealing with it for many years. But it's unless one has a high interest in the science, I'm trying to find a more basic, generalized interpretation of this thing here. And so what you just said, you're correct here, is that the way that the program in the computer is in the metabolic cart, is written, it comes off of the science that of how the body, by by looking at the different compounds that are engaged in this process, such as carbon dioxide and oxygen. There's also nitrogen is another one. Then through a rather long formula, we can figure out how much oxygen is actually being consumed. And so that, and then relative to then the carbon dioxide, we can, it will determine what type of fuel is being metabolized. And that's what this thing called the respiratory exchange ratio is, a respiratory quotient. And it's been determined in a laboratory of when to metabolize these different types of fuels, carbohydrate or protein or fat, how much energy that it puts out, and what is the consistency of the metabolic byproducts, which in this case, it would be like with glucose, for example. When it is metabolized, it produces energy, it produces carbon dioxide, and then there's going to be water. And so looking at the amounts of the end products, because you have your reactants and your products in the chemical equation, by looking at the products, you can determine then what fuel is being utilized. And as the intensity of the exercise goes up, in moderate levels of intensity, and I'm sure you've heard of the zones for training zones. You have zones 1 through 5 is a typical range. There is an easy and moderate levels, and what we primarily burn, metabolize throughout our day is fats. And so this would be more in this zone 1 and zone 2, lower zone 2, when we are exercising. But as the intensity goes up, then lipids becomes less of a contributor to the metabolic process, and there's more of a contribution to carbohydrate. And at first, it's going to be with the aid of oxygen, and this is aerobic glycolysis or oxidative. But then as the oxygen levels become insufficient to be able to metabolize at the intensity that the athlete's going, then it becomes what's known as non-oxidative glycolysis. And this is also when now there is a generation of one of the molecules that compounds. When you oxidize carbohydrate, it goes to a compound known as pyruvate. And if there is enough oxygen present, then it goes to another compound known as acetyl-CoA, and then it goes into the Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle, and it continues to produce ATP. Well, if there is insufficient amount of oxygen, then that pyruvate then is going to go another pathway, and it's going to start to generate lactic acid that quickly then gets converted to lactate. And so, and if the lactate levels go too high, then along with that, there is an increase in hydrogen ions, which causes the pH of the environment to drop. And then this can invite problems. The contractile processes of the muscle fibers, they don't work as well. And enzymes start to become impaired because our bodies our pH is generally around 7.4 in our blood, and 7 is equal. The scale goes from 0 to 14. 14 is considered basic, and then down at 1 is very, very, very acidic. We generally say somewhere in that 6 to 9, 7.4 when it's balanced. We're about 7.4 pH. But in exercise, that pH can come down. As it comes down, then it becomes more acidic. And when it starts to getting down to 6.9, 6.8, the muscles don't work as well. And so what we're trying to do then is to try through proper training to increase our velocity, increase our pace, our speed, but still be able to rely more on, oxidative glycolysis and lipids. So we're saying, let's bring in more and more oxygen, so then we can keep it at an oxidative state. So oxidative glycolysis as opposed to non-oxidative. But when it goes to non-oxidative, it produces a lot more carbon dioxide, and the metabolic analyzer, it picks up on this this enhanced volume production of carbon dioxide. And when we look at, there's certain graphs that are presented during the metabolic testing process, and one of them is looking at heart rate and lactate. Another one is the lactate levels and the fat. You can see on the graph where there's actually a change in the angle of this linear graph, and those are called inflection points. Those inflection points, there's two major ones we're looking for, and these are known as lactate thresholds, and there's actually two of them. One's called an LT1 or VT1, that's lactate threshold 1 or ventilatory threshold 1, and the other one is lactate threshold 2 or ventilatory threshold 2. And this is when the body has started to show a shift between oxidative and non-oxidative glycolysis. And then the last one is when it's kind of a last-ditch effort, where the body is right before it becomes a very much more anaerobic, and where the ability to continue at that high intensity will shorten dramatically. And this is usually at a very, would be considered a high zone 4, low zone 5. But athletes that are very well aerobically conditioned, and they can push these inflection points, or these lactate thresholds, farther along the speed pace axis, if you will. And this is a demonstration that they are becoming more efficient in metabolizing these fuels, and so they can go longer before they experience the deleterious effects of having low pH on their muscles. So their muscles will then, therefore, will continue to work efficiently without the pain that's associated when the pH drops. They can keep that pace up, and this is what where elite athletes prevail, because they have managed with their training and genetic background, which also helps to be able to perform at high levels. But we, as the everybody else, the non-elites out there, we still, our physiology is just like theirs. Outside. In a little bit.
Just for a second.
Okay, good. So yeah, but that's the great thing about, we what we are inside is whether we're elites or whether we are everyday weekend warriors out there. We have the same organs, the same mechanisms for how to metabolize our fuels to produce the energy that we need to, and the science is the same. So yeah, so it's there's kind of a bit about what you're saying, but this is what we're all trying to do, is how do we economize? And that's a big thing behind exercise physiology for performance, is saying how can we make produce a more economical machine, and through proper training. But if we don't have the data, we don't have accurate data and comprehensive data, then it's sort of a hit and miss. It's a much longer process to be able to provide these goals to achieve them. And fortunately, there's metabolic testing that is, like I said, is athlete specific, and can help us get there that much quicker.
How do athletes alter their LT1 or their LT2. To a certain extent, I think LT2, it'd be harder to shift that further along the continuum, if you will. But how can athletes work on that? Do they need to spend more time working at that particular pace when that metabolic process is happening?
Yeah, with the data that comes out of a metabolic test, aerobic capacity test, the T2 can be identified, and that's then is associated with a certain heart rate, a range that then the athlete will use, and then will train with that heart rate, or depending on maybe what kind of training, they can also be associated with the pace or speed that heart rate is associated with. So the VT2, the LT2, VT2, in order to increase that to a higher level, then the body needs to be working in a different type of a muscle fiber. We have two basic types of muscle fiber. We have type 1, type 2, also known as slow twitch and fast twitch. Our fast twitch ones are the type 2, and they're broken down into two other groups. It's called a type 2A and a type 2B. The type 2A is it's a glycolytic, meaning it operates on glucose, but it has oxidative properties to it, and so it can also use oxygen. Whereas type 2B is very highly glycolytic, and but in order for these fibers to be to be trained, you have to provide training that will open a pathway for these fibers to be used. And so unless the intensity is high enough, then those fibers are not used, certainly to the degree that the type 1A fibers, because the type 1, those are the oxidative ones. Those are the ones that will utilize lipids, and the ones that we pretty much use all the time. They're very much in your zone 1, zone 2 training intensities. So in order to push that LT2 to a higher level, one has to do training that's going to be at a higher intensity. And examples of that would be doing, say, going for, say, 1 minute at a 97 to maybe close to 100% of your total oxygen uptake, your VO2 max, running for, say, 60 seconds for at that level, and then taking a 60 to 90 second rest, and then repeating that multiple times. A particular good workout is 8 to 10 of 60-second high intensity running, and then taking 60 to 90-second rest. Or another one is going 30 seconds at that speed, and then taking another 60-second rest here. And so when you're doing that, you're emphasizing these muscles, and this is when then you can actually enhance that type 1 muscle fiber to become more acute and more efficient towards metabolizing, be able to process oxygen. And what that will do is will increase your total oxygen uptake, VO2. And when you can do that, then you can push that LT2 to a higher level. And so that initially, when in more of an untrained state, that LT2 is going to be demonstrating that increased lactate at a lower pace. But as those type 1 type 2A fibers become more more efficient and metabolizing oxygen, then that same individual can go at that pace, but generate less lactate, and then they're not going to get the deleterious effects of having low pH. Or because they are going at a lower level, now they can increase that pace higher level. So then they would be experiencing what they did earlier on, of having lactate starting to move up to a higher level, but they're experiencing it at a faster pace. And that's what it's all about. You know, how can I run faster? How can I run faster and longer, and get to that finish line before my fellow competitors?
Okay.
So how's that?
That's great. I'm still in a very basic understanding. I mean, I'm a human biology major, so what you're saying all makes sense. I'm just trying to understand it in a more granular level, and I'm probably going to take it back to a very basic level of what you were saying. But for your given muscle, let's say the hamstring, are you saying type 1 and type 2 being split into type 2 and type 2B, type 2A, type 2B muscle fibers? Those types, type 1 and type 2, coexist together in whatever muscle. I'm sure that there are varying percentages of the distribution of type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers within whatever given muscle that you are studying. But for the sake of argument, let's say hamstring. And you're saying that when you're exercising, to be able to go faster, you need to be able to contract more of these muscle fibers synchronistically. So if you're going at a slower pace, you're mostly contracting those type 1. And then as you get faster, the type 2A and type 2B. So basically, those type 2A and type 2B are kind of just chilling out in that muscle and aren't being utilized all that often, and trying to turn them. Is it like turning on a switch, basically, when you're activating them? Because I always thought, muscle contraction is all or nothing. You can't just contract some muscles and not others, or some fibers but not others. But I guess maybe it's kind of confusing because it kind of contradicts that, or maybe I'm thinking about it not in the right way. But does what I'm saying, does that make sense in terms of a question? Do I have that kind of relationship with the muscle types or muscle fiber types within a given muscle correct?
Yeah, there's a concept that's called the principle of orderly recruitment, and your muscle fibers are going to they're going to when they receive a stimulus, the muscle fiber that is chosen is going to be sort of, if you look at it on the bottom, like on a ladder, the rungs on a ladder, you're going to go to the bottom one first. And if the intensity and the availability of glucose in the muscle environment is large enough, then the type 1 muscle fiber is what is activated first. And you're correct that there's a principle, a fact that the way the muscle fibers work is called an all or none. Once it's stimulated, the entire all the muscle fibers within a motor unit. Let me describe to you a motor unit. Motor unit is a motor neuron, and all the muscle fibers that it provides a neural impulse to. And not all of the muscle is activated at any one time, because if it did, then there's a strong chance that it would rip the muscle right off of the bone via the tendon. And so you have these little these physiological features within the muscle called Golgi tendon bodies and muscle spindles that prevent muscles from either overstretching or overcontracting. And that's what the Golgi tendon bodies does, is it prevents it from having too much contraction. So you're never stimulating the entire muscle, but you are stimulating once a motor unit is activated. That motor unit will stimulate all those muscle fibers that belong to the one that is stimulating them. So, but
that distinction makes sense. By the way, the motor unit in terms of whatever neuron innervates whatever muscle, all the muscle fibers in that connection are going to be stimulated, but that, like you said, does not include the entire muscle. That makes more sense now, and I'm glad that you made that distinction. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, and this is one of the other many benefits of doing the zone 4, which is also known as threshold training, or your zone 5, your VO2 max training, is that you have an opportunity for enhanced activation, stimulation of the motor neural component of activating muscles. When we think of strength or the force can provide, there's two items here that determine how much force can be generated. Well, one is, of course, the muscle. Larger muscles, like larger cylinders in an engine, they can generate more force. But just like in a internal combustion engine in your car, you have, well, depending on the age of the car, you have something called a spark that generates an electrical spark that goes to the top of your cylinder and ignites that air fuel mixture. Well, if you don't have that spark, that electrical current going there, then independent of the size of the muscles, nothing's going to happen. And so in the human body, in physiology, you have this thing called a motor neuron, and you get electricity that moves, but it's based on different ions, which are charged particles, and the main ones we look at are sodium, chloride, calcium, potassium, and you get a what's called a potential that is driven through the motor neuron, and if you get a full activation of this potential, then you get what's called as something that's called an action potential, and this is from depolarization. If you get full depolarization of your muscle cell, then you get an action potential, and then what that does is it causes contraction of that muscle fiber. So one of the things by doing more high intensity training is you increase what's known as motor neural drive, and you can enhance those neural messages going to the muscles and to be able to activate them. But they need to have the stimulus, and that's where high intensity training will come through. Also with weight training, strength training, you can get this as well, which is why I'm a big advocate. And what I work with, and the athletes that I consult with, is doing weight training, because you can stimulate these muscles, increase neural drive. And so some people, you look at them and you might go, wow, they don't look like this. They're really big and strong and bulky, but they can enact a lot of force in speed of running, or when they shake your hand, or do the bench press. And it's because you have to have good neural drive. And that's something that you can work on through proper training. So, this is just a little going back in history, but I remember in grade school, there was this individual, I was a classmate, and he was not into sports at all, didn't really have an athletic body, so to speak, but nobody could run as fast as this guy. He was incredibly fast, and it was right off of the block, so to speak. He could move very fast, and his handshake, it would crush your hand, and not like he tried to, But this was an example long before I became a physiologist. I didn't understand this, but years later I did. It's because he had neural drive, which was at a high level. So that's what I was saying, going back to the end, your car engine. If you don't have that spark going in there, that doesn't matter how big of the cylinders you have, nothing's going to happen. And same thing with the human body. You have to be able to have that neural drive. So, and this is when these type 2A fibers, they get more involved in it, because that principle of orderly recruitment that I was talking about says, okay, we're not going to bring these in until there is this stimulus. There is this, because that individual is now saying, if say for running, that you're at you're going up a hill and you want to be able to get up this thing and trying to maintain your pace and be able to leap over boulders and other obstacles that you have on the trail. You're going to have to be able to have muscle that can move very quickly. And type 1, the oxidative fibers, they can't do that nearly as good as your type 2A and type 2B fibers. So those are the ones that can help you be able to safely be able to negotiate the obstacles on a trail, to be able to push your body to that next step along, in a trail, move a little bit faster, or outkick your opponent at the end. And along the way of stimulating these fibers, you're increasing their oxidative capacity, especially with the type 2A. And you also are being able to increase the body's ability to buffer the lower pH that comes from carbonic acid and lactic acid, and there's buffers in the body. Is sodium bicarbonate, potassium bicarbonate are big ones. And if you can buffer that acid, you can prevent that pH from falling too low and causing those negative effects on muscle tension and enzyme impairment. And so this is all can happen when you do this type of training in that upper level. And so bringing it back to before, that's how you get that LT2 to be able to move farther on the right side of the graph, which then is a demonstration that the pace, now you are taking that LT2 and it's now not occurring until a higher speed or pace in the run. And you are becoming that athlete process of getting that over there. And the VO2 is also going up. So all these things come together with good, proper training, but you need the data, you need the accurate data. You need somebody to be able to explain it enough to be able to say, this is why you need to do what you do.
An athlete wants to increase their, you called it neural drive, or was it motor neural drive?
Motor neural drive, yeah.
Okay.
They want for the motor neuron.
Okay. They want to increase their motor neural drive in order to improve upon their LT1, LT2, and they implement running on a treadmill at very quick paces that perhaps they can't ordinarily achieve on a track by themselves. And, is that helpful? Because what component of that firing process is being taken over by a treadmill? And
well, excuse me, let me stop you there. The training is not on the treadmill. That's where the data acquisition is coming from. That's the metabolic.
I know, but I'm just like, if somebody wants to take this information away and try and improve their thresholds and everything, and they think, well, I can't run that fast on a track, but I do want to achieve these speeds, and I'm going to try to run on a treadmill because you can dictate pace and you can keep up with the belt, I guess, if you will. And if you're doing that, if you're going faster on a treadmill and you are achieving those speeds, is that motor neural drive still being developed, even though you're perhaps, I guess, to an extent being aided by the treadmill? Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. It is, I don't have data in front of me that I can go ahead and draw from that says that you can achieve the benefits on a treadmill at this percentage relative to what you could on on terra firma, on a non-treadmill surface. It certainly is. It would be a way that, yes, achieve these type 2A fiber development, but my suggestion is for somebody to go to along, either a track or a pedestrian trail or someplace that's relatively flat where they can do some of this higher intensity work without having to concentrate on many of the aspects that obstacles that occur, in a trail environment. I'm a trail runner. I love doing that, but when I'm trying to go ahead and be able to bring about the developments, I want to try to remove some of the distractions that could that why I'm track or on a road, or someplace that is free from the obstacles. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious if perhaps force production was negated by the treadmill doing X amount of work, and but what you're saying is, obviously doing it organically and getting the propulsion of moving over the ground yourself is, unless you're going to compete in a treadmill race, then yeah, that makes no sense to train in whatever environment the race will actually be on, or be in, excuse me. So, yeah, thank you, Mike, for all this information. And, we went into depth about metabolic testing. Are there any other services or any other work that you do that you would like to discuss a little bit more?
There's what I would like, probably I say in a future podcast would be good to go into the treadmill, the testing environment, the testing experience. What can an athlete, how to prepare for a metabolic test? What can they expect? What is the protocol surrounding it? And what kind of things are going to be asked of the athlete during the test. And there's different things there. There's the lactate testing. What's involved in extracting a blood sample. And I would imagine, and that this would be something that an athlete would like to know. What will I be expecting? To experience along the way. And so this is, these are a lot of the practical type of things that I believe are necessary, and the athlete has a right to know these kind of things, certainly for curiosity's sake and how best to prepare. So that would be something that I would love to. There's not enough time I wouldn't want to minimize all that in a couple minutes, but that would be something in the future I would like to be able to provide to your listeners out there.
Absolutely. I'm someone who wants to know about the science, but it's the practical experience, if you will, that I guess a lot more people would be like, well, what should I expect when I visit, and what does the testing involve exactly? So that would definitely be interesting to discuss further on another episode. But yeah, thank you so much for all of this information. And for people who want to get in touch with you, perhaps work with you via your services, where can they contact you?
They can contact me certainly through my email, which is mweiss at altahps.com, and that stands for Alta. HPS is Health and Performance Solutions, or my phone number. They're welcome to reach me there. It's 925-997-3047. And then also my website, altahps.com. And also on social media on Instagram as well. So I would be happy to discuss any of this, the science side of it. I love that. That's my passion. But certainly the practical sides of it. And for those, that would like to get this data to really help them be able to achieve that potential. That for many, it might be a bit latent because they haven't had the right data to go ahead and be able to then design the training program that will work for them. So any of those methods will work.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being on this episode of the Performance Collective, and we will have you back on very, very soon, hopefully, to get that information. But thanks again.
It's been my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me here. And I look forward to future opportunities to help people achieve the results that I know that they would like to achieve. Thank you.